many have called the best 8 minutes of boxing ever. He is the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. Please welcome Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
He was one of the greatest fighters to ever step into a boxing ring. But what happened outside the spotlight left fans stunned, and the ending to his story is one that still leaves people shaken. Join us as we look into the heartbreaking tragedy of Marvelous Marvin Hagler, the making of a champion. Marvin Hagler was born on May 23, 1954, in Newark, New Jersey. His childhood was tough from the very beginning. He grew up in a poor neighborhood where life was dangerous and full of hardship. Crime was everywhere, and the streets were filled with violence. His family didn't have much money, and every day felt like a struggle just to get by. For young Marvin, survival wasn't just about food or shelter. It was about learning how to be strong enough to protect himself. In 1967, when Marvin was just 12 years old, his life changed forever. That summer, the Newark riots broke out. These were violent clashes between police and the local black community, caused by years of tension and mistreatment. Fires burned across the city, and the streets became war zones. Marvin's family had seen enough. They packed up and left Newark behind, hoping to find peace in a new place. That place was Brockton, Massachusetts. At first, life in Brockton wasn't much easier. Marvin was still a quiet, shy kid trying to find his place. But it didn't take long for something to grab his attention: boxing. He walked into a local gym run by two brothers, Goody and Pat Petronelli. They immediately saw something special in Marvin. He didn't say much, but he trained with a fire in his eyes. He wasn't just interested in boxing, he was completely obsessed. Marvin once said, "If they cut my bald head open, they'd find a glove. That's all I am, I live it." The Petronelli brothers didn't just teach him how to punch. They taught him how to think, how to stay calm under pressure, and how to believe in himself. They helped him grow not just as a boxer, but as a person. Over time, Marvin started to change. He built up his strength. He developed a southpaw stance, meaning he fought with his right hand forward, and it confused his opponents. He also trained his body to take hits without slowing down. His chin became so strong that punches barely shook him. But getting into the ring was just the beginning. Marvin's real fight was with a system that didn't want to let him win: a blacklisted boxer. Marvin Hagler's journey as a professional boxer started in 1973. He made his debut by fighting Terry Ryan, a local fighter. The match didn't last long. Marvin knocked Ryan out in the second round. It was a strong start, and people could see that he had real power and skill. But even with such a promising beginning, Marvin didn't get the attention or opportunities that other fighters were getting at the time. The problem wasn't his ability, it was how dangerous he was. Promoters and other fighters saw Marvin as a high-risk, low-reward opponent. This meant he was too good to be an easy win. But he wasn't yet famous enough to make big money for the people involved, so instead of getting chances to fight top contenders, Marvin was avoided. Big-name fighters didn't want to step into the ring with him. They were afraid of losing to someone who didn't have a strong following yet. As a result, Marvin was stuck. He kept winning fights. But those victories didn't lead to bigger matches. The politics of boxing held him back. Major promoters ignored him. He was often left off main events and had to settle for fighting in the background on undercards. It was a pattern of disrespect that continued for years. But Marvin didn't complain. Instead, he fought. He accepted fights anywhere and against anyone. He traveled to different cities and fought in small venues, often in front of crowds that didn't know who he was. Sometimes those crowds were even hostile. Still, Marvin showed up ready to prove himself. He once said, "I'll fight anybody. I don't care where or when." That wasn't just a line. It was how he lived. He built his record by taking on tough opponents, often with little support and no spotlight. Each fight was a step forward, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. He knew he had to keep going if he wanted a real shot at a title. Finally, in 1979, Marvin got that shot. He faced Vito Antuofermo for the WBA and WBC middleweight titles. It was his first major championship fight, and he fought with everything he had. Most people watching thought Marvin had clearly won. He landed more punches, controlled the ring, and looked stronger throughout the fight. But when the judges announced the result, it was a draw. The decision shocked the crowd. Reporters and fans were stunned. Marvin had done more than enough to win, and now the title was being kept from him again. It was a painful reminder that even when he fought his best, he still had to fight against unfairness. That draw was more than just a bad call. It was a symbol of the system that had been working against him since the beginning. But Marvin didn't give up. Less than a year later, on September 27, 1980, he traveled to London to fight Alan Minter for the same titles. Marvin didn't just beat Minter, he destroyed him. The fight lasted only 3 rounds. Marvin overwhelmed him with power, speed, and focus. When the referee stopped the fight, Marvin had finally become the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. But even this moment of triumph wasn't without pain. After the fight, a riot broke out in the arena. Many of Minter's fans were angry that a black American had taken the title from a British fighter. Bottles and debris were thrown into the ring. Marvin and his team had to be rushed out for safety. It was supposed to be the greatest moment of his career, but instead, it ended in chaos. He had proven he was the best, but the victory felt bittersweet. The disrespect had followed him all the way to the top. And just when he thought things might get easier, his battles were about to reach a whole new level. The Warrior's reign. After years of being avoided, ignored, and denied, Marvin Hagler finally became the undisputed middleweight champion of the world in September 1980. But he didn't take time to celebrate or relax. He went straight back to work. For Marvin, becoming champion was only the beginning. Now he had to prove that he deserved to stay at the top. And he did just that again and again. His first title defense came on January 17, 1981, against Fulgencio Obalmejias, an undefeated fighter from Venezuela. The match took place in Boston, and Marvin fought with the kind of intensity that fans were beginning to expect from him. He broke Obalmejias down round by round, and in the 8th, the referee stopped the fight. Marvin had won by technical knockout. It was a strong start to his title reign and a sign of things to come. Over the next several years, Marvin Hagler defended his middleweight titles 12 times. He didn't just win, he dominated. His fights were often brutal, and most of them didn't go the distance. He took on all challengers, never ducking a single opponent. Fighters like Mustafa Hamsho, Juan Domingo Roldan, and Wilfred Scipion all stepped into the ring with him, and each of them walked out defeated. Some were knocked out. Some were cut so badly that the fight had to be stopped. Others were simply outclassed from start to finish. But even as he crushed his opponents, Marvin carried a heavy chip on his shoulder. He never forgot how long it took to get the opportunities he deserved. And even now, as champion, he still felt disrespected. The media didn't give him the same attention they gave to flashier fighters. Promoters and broadcasters often gave more praise to boxers with quick smiles and big endorsements. Marvin wasn't smiling. He was winning, but that didn't seem to be enough. One moment during this time showed just how deeply that lack of respect bothered him. Before a fight in 1982, the ring announcer introduced him as Marvin Hagler, leaving out the nickname Marvelous that Marvin had worked so hard to earn. That was the final straw. Soon after, Marvin went to court and legally changed his name to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. From that point on, everyone was required to say it. For Marvin, it wasn't just about a name. It was about being seen, heard, and respected. The disrespect he felt didn't break him, it fueled him. Every slight, every ignored headline, and every overlooked victory made him more dangerous in the ring. His fights became more than just title defenses. They were personal. He wasn't just defending a belt, he was demanding recognition. What made Marvin so hard to beat was more than just his mindset. His fighting style was completely his own. He fought in a southpaw stance, which meant he led with his right hand and punched with his left. Most fighters weren't used to that, and it threw off their rhythm. He also had a chin that could take an incredible amount of punishment. Even when he got hit with clean shots, he kept moving forward. On top of that, Marvin trained like no one else. He lived a strict, disciplined life. While other fighters might party or take long breaks between matches, Marvin lived like a soldier. His body was always in top shape, and his focus never left the ring. And soon, he would step into the ring for the most violent and unforgettable fight of his career. The Forgotten King. In the 1980s, boxing entered what many people consider its most exciting era. At the center of it all were 4 legendary fighters: Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hitman Hearns, and Roberto Hands. of Stone Duran. They became known as the Four Kings, and together they helped shape a golden age for the sport. What made this era so special was that all four actually fought each other. In today's boxing world, top fighters often avoid facing one another to protect their undefeated records or wait for the right deal. But the Four Kings were different. They didn't dodge fights. They didn't wait years. They got in the ring and settled it the old-fashioned way, by fighting. And fans were treated to some of the greatest matches in boxing history because of that. But even in this group of legends, Marvin Hagler stood apart, for a different reason. While Leonard, Hearns, and Duran all enjoyed early fame and massive support, Marvin was the outsider. The others had huge media attention, big-name sponsors, and powerful promoters backing them from early in their careers. They were in commercials. They were smiling on magazine covers. They had star power. Marvin, on the other hand, had none of that. He had the Petronelli brothers, a small gym in Brockton, and a deep hunger to prove himself. He didn't get easy fights or big contracts. He had to fight through dangerous opponents in small venues just to get noticed. His road to the top was built on struggle, not spotlight. And even after becoming champion, Marvin still felt like the odd man out. Sugar Ray Leonard was boxing's golden boy, handsome, charming, and beloved by the media. Thomas Hearns had knockout power and was promoted as a rising superstar. Duran had already become a legend by the time he fought Marvin. Marvin had to keep reminding people he belonged. He carried that bitterness into every fight. He wasn't just fighting for titles. He was fighting to be seen as an equal. He knew that if he made even one mistake, the media would forget all the hard work he'd done. But if the others made a mistake, they'd still be treated like stars. That double standard ate away at him. When he faced Hearns and Duran, and later Leonard, Marvin wasn't just thinking about winning. He was thinking about everything he had been through. Every time he was denied a shot, and every time the media chose someone else over him. Commentators often said Marvin seemed to fight with something extra, an anger or drive that other fighters didn't have. That's because for Marvin, every punch was personal. He beat Roberto Duran in a close 15-round decision. It was a smart, technical fight, and it showed that Marvin wasn't just a brawler. He was a thinker in the ring, too. Against Hearns, he delivered one of the most violent and memorable knockouts in boxing history, proving his toughness to the world. And when he fought Leonard, it was more than just a title defense. It was a chance to prove once and for all that he was better than the rest. But no matter how many wins he stacked up, Marvin still had to fight harder than the other kings to earn the same respect. He knew that being great wasn't enough. He had to be better every time. He had to dominate. He had to destroy. And even then, sometimes it still wasn't enough. But one fight, just 3 rounds long, would finally give him the spotlight he had always deserved. Boxing's bloodiest night. On April 15, 1985, one of the most unforgettable fights in boxing history took place at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. It was Marvelous Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hitman Hearns, a showdown that would later be called The War. This wasn't just a regular title defense. This was personal. This was violent. This was boxing at its most intense. The build-up to the fight was filled with tension. For weeks, the two fighters went on a 23-city press tour to promote the match. At first, there was mutual respect between them. But city after city, interview after interview, things started to change. The long days of travel and constant media attention turned that respect into something else, real anger. By the time fight night came, both men were ready to tear each other apart. When the bell rang to start round 1, the crowd expected a slow feeling-out process. That didn't happen. From the first second, both fighters exploded with punches. Hearns came in fast, throwing his powerful right hand. He landed one of the hardest shots of his career directly on Hagler's chin. It was a punch that would have knocked out most fighters, but Hagler didn't go down. He didn't even back up. He kept walking forward. That moment shocked everyone. If Hearns couldn't hurt Hagler with his best punch, what else could he do? What followed was 3 rounds of non-stop violence. Both fighters threw everything they had. There was no defense, just power, speed, and aggression. It was later described as the most violent 8 minutes in boxing history. Fans couldn't believe what they were seeing. This wasn't just a fight, it was war. Then, something terrible happened. During the second round, Hearns opened a deep cut above Hagler's right eye. Blood started pouring down his face. It was a serious injury, and for a moment Marvin didn't even know it was happening. The referee stopped the fight to have the doctor check the cut. That's when Hagler's worst fear kicked in. For years, Marvin worried about losing, not because he was beaten, but because of a technical stoppage, something out of his control. Now, in the biggest fight of his life, that fear was becoming real. He was worried they might stop the fight because of the cut and give Hearns the win by default. But Marvin wasn't going to let that happen. When the fight resumed, he came out like a man possessed. He ignored the blood and went straight at Hearns. His punches were fast, hard, and full of rage. He trapped Hearns, landed a crushing right hand, and knocked him down. Hearns tried to get up, but his legs gave out. The referee stopped the fight. It was over. Hagler had won in round 3 by knockout. The crowd exploded. Commentators were stunned. It was one of the most dramatic and emotional fights the sport had ever seen. Marvin didn't just win the fight, he willed himself to victory. Promoter Bob Arum later said, he willed himself to win. Even Thomas Hearns years later gave Marvin full credit. "I can't take anything away from him," he said. "His awkwardness messed me up. He fought his heart out. We put on a great show for all time." But even after all of that, the heartbreak wasn't over. The fight may have ended in glory, but the next chapter would bring the most painful moment of his career. And that moment was coming fast. The fight nobody remembers. On November 10, 1983, Marvin Hagler stepped into the ring to defend his middleweight title against one of the most respected names in boxing, Roberto "Hands" of Stone Duran. Unlike Marvin's brutal war with Hearns, this fight was a slow burn. It wasn't about raw power or violence. It was about strategy, patience, and control. Duran was no ordinary opponent. By that point, he had already been a world champion in 3 different weight classes. He had faced legends like Sugar Ray Leonard and held his own against the best in the sport. Duran was crafty, experienced, and incredibly tough. He wasn't going to be knocked out easily, and he certainly wasn't going to be intimidated. From the opening bell, it was clear this fight would be different from most of Marvin's others. Duran didn't come to trade wild punches or fall apart under pressure. Instead, he used movement, defense, and timing to frustrate Hagler. For most of the fight, Duran stayed just out of reach, slipping punches and countering whenever he could. Marvin, who usually broke opponents down with steady aggression, had to change his approach. He realized early on that he wouldn't win this fight with brute force. He had to be smart. He had to stay patient. That's exactly what he did. For 15 hard rounds, the two men battled in what many boxing fans call a technical war. Marvin adjusted his pace. He cut off the ring, worked the body, and didn't get reckless. Duran was dangerous the entire fight, but Marvin never let him take control. As the rounds went on, Marvin's superior conditioning began to show. While Duran started to slow just slightly, Marvin kept moving forward, landing clean punches and winning the exchanges. By the final bell, Marvin hadn't scored a knockout, but he had clearly outboxed and outlasted one of the smartest fighters in the game. The judges all saw it the same way. A unanimous decision win for Marvelous Marvin Hagler, even though it wasn't flashy. Many boxing analysts later pointed to this fight as one of Marvin's most complete performances. He showed everything: defense, footwork, timing, and ring IQ. He proved he could be more than just a tough, aggressive brawler. He could play the long game and win against a master technician. But like many moments in Marvin's career, this win didn't get the spotlight it deserved. Fans and media focused more on his knockout victories. The Duran fight rarely comes up in highlight reels, even though it was a showcase of Marvin's greatness. But the fight that would truly test his legacy and break his heart was just around the corner. Robbed in plain sight. On April 6, 1987, Marvin Hagler stepped into the ring for what would become the most debated and painful fight of his entire career. That night, he faced Sugar Ray Leonard, a fighter he had wanted to fight for years. Leonard had been retired for almost 3 years and hadn't fought a serious opponent in even longer. Still, the fight was promoted as the fight of the decade, and the world was watching. For Marvin, this was supposed to be the final stamp on his legacy. He had beaten everyone else: Duran, Hearns, all the top contenders. Leonard was the last of the 4 kings left to face. A win over him would silence all critics and prove, once and for all, who the best really was. From the start, the matchup was a clash of styles. Marvin Hagler was known for constant pressure, toughness, and power. Leonard, on the other hand, was all about speed, movement, and quick combinations. In the fight, Leonard used the ring well. He stayed on the outside, threw quick jabs, and flurried at the end of rounds to catch the judges' eyes. He didn't try to brawl. He tried to score points and survive. Marvin, as always, moved forward the entire fight. He landed the harder punches and dictated the pace. He didn't throw as many punches as Leonard, but when he did connect, the impact was clear. He focused on cutting off the ring and making Leonard work for every second. But when the final bell rang, it wasn't up to them anymore. It was in the hands of the judges, and that's when the heartbreak came. The decision was a split decision win for Sugar Ray Leonard. One judge gave it clearly to Leonard, another had it slightly for Hagler. The third, who was considered neutral, gave it to Leonard by just one round. The boxing world erupted in controversy. Many fans and reporters believed Marvin had done enough to win, especially given how he controlled the pace and landed the more powerful shots. Critics pointed out that Leonard stole rounds by flurrying in the final 30 seconds, even in rounds where Marvin had done better work for most of the time. Some called it a robbery. Others said it was just smart boxing by Leonard. But to Marvin Hagler, it felt like betrayal. He had spent his whole career fighting for respect, often being ignored or overlooked. Now, even after finally getting the biggest fight of his career, he believed the sport had taken it from him. He felt like the decision was made before the fight even began, that the media darling Leonard was always going to get the win unless Marvin knocked him out. After the fight, Marvin didn't beg for a rematch. He didn't complain to the commission. He simply walked away. He refused to fight Leonard again, famously saying, "Tell Ray to get a life." Just like that, he retired. At only 32 years old, Marvin Hagler left the sport of boxing, not because of age, not because of injury, but because of heartbreak. He didn't lose his love for the fight itself. He lost his faith in the system that controlled it. His retirement didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like an exile. One of the greatest champions the sport had ever seen left quietly, with no farewell tour, no final victory lap, and no chance to reclaim what he believed was stolen from him. He never fought again. The heartbreaking end. On March 13, 2021, the boxing world was hit with news that no one was expecting. Marvelous Marvin Hagler, one of the sport's all-time greats, had passed away suddenly at the age of 66. He was at home in New Hampshire, where he had been living a quiet life with his wife, Kay. There had been no reports of illness, no warnings. He was simply here one moment and gone the next. Kay Hagler shared the devastating news in a message on social media. She wrote that Marvin had died unexpectedly, surrounded by family. The announcement was short, but it shook fans, fighters, and sports writers across the world. In a time when people are used to hearing about long battles with illness or hospital stays, this was different. Marvin hadn't been sick. He hadn't been fading away. He had just left. The final bell had rung, and no one saw it coming. What followed was an outpouring of love and sorrow from around the globe. People who had grown up watching Marvin fight remembered not just the knockouts or the titles, but the way he carried himself with pride, strength, and discipline. For those who knew him personally, it wasn't just a great fighter they lost. It was a deeply loyal and humble man. Even the men he battled in the ring came forward with heavy hearts. Sugar Ray Leonard, who had shared the ring with Marvin in one of the most controversial fights in boxing history, expressed deep sadness and respect. He said he was crushed by the news and called Marvin a true warrior and champion. Thomas Hearns, who had gone toe-to-toe with Hagler in the unforgettable War of 1985, also paid tribute. Despite their intense rivalry, Hearns never stopped respecting Marvin. He posted on social media that he was honored to have shared the ring with him and called him one of the best to ever do it. Roberto Duran, another of the legendary Four Kings, also shared his grief, calling Hagler not only a great fighter, but a good man. Promoter Bob Arum, who worked with Marvin during the height of his career, said, "He was one of the greatest people I've ever promoted. He was a real man, loyal and honorable." Arum's words echoed what many in boxing already knew. Marvin wasn't just great in the ring, he was great outside of it too. Marvin Hagler's death left a hole in the heart of boxing. He had been more than just a fighter. He was a symbol of hard work, focus, and quiet greatness. He didn't chase the spotlight, it found him, eventually. But in the end, it was never about fame for Marvin. It was always about respect. And even in death, that respect came flooding in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another look at celeb history.